Let's go to Tom Murphy, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Whole Hog Sports. Tom, I'm going to start you out pretty hot. Do you think Jaxon Wiggins should continuously be the Game 3 starter based on kind of some of his inconsistencies this year?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Well, Ty, you were aware that he was 5-0 going into that start yesterday. So, yeah, I think that would be a quick trigger. He's had a tendency to be able to work out of some jams, but not yesterday in the first inning. So, I think you have a longer rope. And the question would be then, who would go in that spot? I mean, would Cole Ramage go in the spot? Do you trust somebody like a Will McIntyre? And right now he's throwing in midweeks. So I'd say you'd hang on for another weekend and see how things go. And, I mean, his ERA is starting to creep up there. But, you know, if he can mix his pitches and locate, he's a fine pitcher. So I think they'll have a little bit more rope with him.
What did you think about that game number 3 where Arkansas again started out slow and the pitching? Dave talked about the starting pitching. It just kind of was the difference in that one. And then Arkansas come back. How do you think the 8th inning played out? And do you think Dave is maybe second-guessing himself a little bit this morning just based on how they had, again, 0 outs and had a chance to tie that game up?
Right, yeah. And the guy who came in, who gave up the double to Leach, was a strikeout guy who really controlled them in the Friday game. In my view, when Webb came up, I did not watch that sequence. So I'm not sure if he tried the bunt, but I think if he lays down a good bunt, you can do a suicide squeeze, you can just do a regular squeeze, but he's a great bunter. One of the team's best. So with him being the first guy in that sequence, I think that's what I would have done just to try to get that tying run in. And then from there, I mean, the pressure's off a little bit if you tie it. And so Slavens and a Wallace and whoever follows don't have as much pressure on them. But, boy, Slavens sure did not like strike 3. And he let that be known. Not quite as vehemently as Kyle Schwarber did over the weekend, but he let it be known.
Yeah. So here is kind of my thought on it. I want to see if you think similar or you got a different take. You know, losing's never good, but the result is now you're in a tighter race in the West, which puts you on edge or maybe a little more sense of urgency, maybe makes your team sharper and maybe more postseason ready. I mean, maybe that's the silver lining I'm looking for in a cloud where you only won 1 of 3 on the weekend. But, Tom, it puts you back into a battle for the West, which I think and I know is important to this team. Does this put this team on edge a little more sense of urgency with 4 weekends to go that will propel them into a postseason run?
Well, I do believe it does. You know, it minimizes the margin you got for sure. You're down to 1 game over Auburn. And
you're not as comfortable as I guess what I'm trying to drive at.
No, certainly not as comfortable. And you've lost another road series, so, you know, the thing's out there now. Oh, they've lost their last 2 road series, and their other road series before that was Missouri, and you know, and they went to a rubber match. So I think, you know, Auburn in 2 weeks, that shapes up to be a potential for, you know, if Auburn could sweep, to overtake Arkansas in the lead. So I do think they're going to be on edge, and I think that Ole Miss coming in here, sure, Arkansas is favored, and maybe they should sweep. But because Ole Miss is struggling with its starting pitching. Yeah. But they're still a very dangerous team, and if they jump out to a 6-0 lead, who's to say they can't hold that? So, yeah, I do think they're just going to be more on edge. And there's, you know, these are the same things that bothered Arkansas early in the season. It was the clutch situational hitting, where you're striking out instead of making contact. And there's been a lot of that this year. So the frustration part's up. You know, I would still say they might not still be set with their batting order, because he moved Caden Wallace down to 3rd for the weekend. And, you know, did Braden Webb show you enough in the leadoff role? Has Peyton Stovall settled in? He had a better weekend, but he hasn't hit in the clutch. You know, has he settled down enough that maybe you consider putting him back leadoff? I don't think I would. I think a more comfortable spot for him is now down in the A-hole. And so still a lot of questions with this team now, outside of, you know, Nolan and, you know, Hagen Smith has been good enough, and the back end of the bullpen's been good enough, but there's still a few questions.
So which question's more important to answer this weekend? Starting pitching, which Dave referenced, which seems to be set in the order, but as far as performance, because that's what Dave Van Horn talked about after the game, or what everyone's talking about, the timely hitting this weekend. Which is the more important question to answer against Ole Miss?
Yeah, God, you need them both, don't you?
Yeah.
I just think, getting your starting rotation, making sure Wiggins is going to be your guy. I just don't see where they move off of him for this coming weekend. So maybe he has a better performance, commands the zone better. And by the way, after game 2, the game they won and held A&M to 1 run, he's talking about the strike zone and how it just was a different kind of zone. Like you couldn't be sure of it, and that cost Hagen Smith probably some innings. But Wiggins has got to know what a guy's zone is, and then command his pitches in it. And I just think he was up too much. And but the clutch hitting has got to get better. And I don't know how you make it better, because I think the more you press on it and worry about it, less tendency you have to fix it. So I did hear him on his pregame radio yesterday say, when someone's struggling, and I think they were talking about Caden Wallace, you just talk about going up the middle more, just trying to go up the middle, and quite often that kind of helps you solve the problem, and then you're just getting the barrel on the ball, and then you end up starting to be able to pull it or whatever you're trying to do.
Tom, you wrote a really good piece in Whole Hog Sports Arkansas Democrat-Gazette talking about the bond between KJ Jefferson and Kendall Briles. First time ever since he's been an offensive coordinator, he's had a guy return as his starting quarterback. How much improvement should we see from this offense in KJ this year?
Yeah, that really hit me when we had Kendall Briles up a couple of weeks ago, when he referenced that. So he's gone through several years as being the OC, at Houston, Florida Atlantic, and Florida State, and it turns out that KJ is his first returning starter. It's pretty amazing. So I think he feels like that there's a lot of room for improvement for KJ. And what does that mean? Being cleaner on his reads, getting the ball out of the belly of the dive guy quicker, and then making quick throws. Because KJ's first season as a starter, I hope this goes down in Arkansas football history as one of the better seasons by a quarterback. 67.3% completions. He challenged the 1-year-old record of Felipe Franks. His 21-4 touchdown to interception ratio is just a beautiful ratio, and his running was good too. If they keep him healthy, I think he can add to the running totals a little bit. I think that overall team rushing can be bigger. All those backs seem to have bought into the idea of like a 3 or 4-headed monster coming at you, and it saves wear and tear on their bodies for their next levels. And then maybe Malik Hornsby gets a little bit more run, but I just think his completion percentage can go up a trickle, and he can just be quicker with his reads, because he did have a fine season. And as Kendall Briles said, the biggest number that you measure a quarterback on is winning, and KJ won 9 games.
Tom, should we expect to hear Sam Pittman's contract's terms released this week? I'm assuming that you might be the guy that FIOAs that or something.
I'm thinking that this week would be good timing for these numbers to come out. Yeah, I think there were some folks who were out of town who needed to review and sign and things like that. So this week, and I think it's going to be an interesting deal. I mean, there's a lot of different parameters that you can look at, and Wally wrote about that in his column yesterday. What the numbers might look like, what deferred compensation there would be. Are there going to be escalators in this one as there was before? What does the buyout look like? So a lot of neat numbers to parse through when this one comes out.
Were you at the show on Saturday night?
I miss Garth Brooks. But man, I looked at social media the next morning, and it looked like a good time was had by all. They sure timed it right, y'all, because if that had been yesterday, it would have been a disaster.
Yeah, they dodged one there with the weather, that's for sure. Tom, good stuff. We'll talk to you again on Thursday.
Sounds good, y'all. Have a good week.
All right, Tom Murphy, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette here with us on The Morning Rush.
Is your number one source for all your betting needs, sports info, and odds. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's odds for the Masters Championship and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so join today. Learn why everyone is saying BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on popular sports and games. BetOnline, where the game starts.